Hey guys, welcome back. Episode number 5. We're going to transition now from dealing with stability issues. Even though we haven't exhausted those yet, we've given you enough to be starting off with. We're going to focus now on mobility. We see a lot of athletes who have difficulties getting into the correct positions because they are very tight and restricted, particularly around the lower back and the hips, of course. So the first exercise is going to be dealing with one of the most common problems, which is mobility or movement potential through the front of your thigh and through the front of your hip. Many of us who spend a lot of time sitting for a living or sitting down at a desk all day can become very, very tight and restricted here, which leads to many problems with low back and hips and knees when you're running regularly. This exercise is going to be invaluable for you going forward for the next few months. I will show you the exercise first in its full version, and then we'll talk a little bit about some normal regressions that you can try to make this more manageable in the first instance. Be warned, this position is rather uncomfortable and is one of the ones that people least like to do in terms of their running maintenance work. For this, you're going to need a floor mat and you're going to need a wall space at home, ideally without too much of a skirting board present. That doesn't really matter hugely. You're going to begin with your hands and knees on the floor, and depending on which leg you are going to start with first, that's the leg, the stretching leg, that you are going to put into position against the wall with the toes facing the ceiling. From here is the difficult part of this exercise, which is transitioning from here to the actual starting position of this exercise. Now, many of you may not be able to get into this position, but don't worry, we're going to show you some regressions in just a moment. In terms of setup here, you'll notice that my heel of my foot and the heels of my hands kind of make a line which goes across the floor. I'm not on my knuckles or my fingers, I am on the palms of my hands. From this position, some of you may feel like your foot is outside your hip, so you'll have to correct yourself or have a look and square yourself up. Now, this exercise is an active mobilization, it's not a passive stretch. In order to do the stretch, you have to squeeze your bottom very tight. And if we go back to a previous episode where you used your bottom, this will serve you well for the purpose of this exercise. So you're going to squeeze your bottom tight, and I'm going to imagine I'm pushing the belt line of my shorts towards this line that I've created across the floor with the heels of my hands. I'm going to drive my hip downwards into the floor. And I'm going to push, 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 and squeeze my bottom tight to achieve it. Now, if I'm doing this well, and I have a normal level of movement, you should be able to draw a straight line from your knee to your hip to your shoulder when you're in the bottom position. As you'll probably see with me there now at the bottom, my knee, my hip and my shoulder are in a straight line with each other. What you are going to find is that your hip is stuck up in the air like this, or that your back is rounded like this. This is because you're missing movement from the front of your thigh and the front of your hip, and it's a big problem for you. So you're going to work towards being able to get into this position. Now, clearly that is an advanced position. In terms of practicalities, it's a normal level of movement, but for many of you, it's going to be very challenging. So in order to make you successful, we are going to regress the stretch a little so that it's more achievable. The first regression I want you to try is as follows. You are simply going to start with your knee further away from the wall than you originally tried. Let's say we're going to come 6 inches away, and we're going to try the position again. If it's still too tight, you're going to bring your knee further away from the wall, and you're going to try again. And you're going to keep bringing your knee away from the wall until you feel like you can get into a position which is kind of replicating what we're after. Now, in order for this stretch to be successful, you have to be able to squeeze your bum while you're doing it. If you cannot squeeze your bottom, you're not doing this stretch correctly, and you've probably put yourself into a position that is beyond what you're currently capable of doing. So if you can't make your bum tight while you're doing this, you need to regress the stretch further. Another little simple method for this can be to use something with which to support yourself on or lift yourself up a little higher. This can make this stretch much more achievable for many of you, as you can now sit here for longer and be more comfortable in this position. The final regression option that you have, of course, is instead of using the wall behind you, you could hook your foot simply over the back of a dining chair or your sofa at home, and it makes it a little bit more comfortable again to do the exercise. However, the purpose of this exercise is for you to try and chase being back into this full version position. This is going to demonstrate what we would consider to be a normal level of hip mobility from the front of the hip. If you are going to perform this, there are many different types of tissue that are going to need a chance to change while you're squeezing your bum and pushing forward. As a result, you're going to have to hold these positions for quite a bit longer than you'd like. We normally say in excess of a minute on each occasion, and change legs accordingly. You might find one is tighter than the other, spend more time on the one that is most tight, of course, but don't neglect both sides. This stretch is undoubtedly one of the most uncomfortable. In terms of the stretch intensity or the discomfort level you're feeling, it shouldn't exceed a 6 or 7 out of 10. Okay, 10 being the most pain you can imagine. You want this to feel like it's around about a 6. That makes it manageable and allows you to successfully continue stretching without having too much disruption to that program from discomfort.